Saviez-vous que les grands changements viennent toujours de petits gestes ? Comme cuisiner avec une électricité verte et durable. Choisissez l'énergie d'Iberdrola, l'un des leaders mondiaux des énergies renouvelables. 100 millions de personnes dans le monde l'ont déjà fait. Pour plus d'informations, contactez-nous au 0805 98 31 05. Faites-le pour vous. Contribuez à protéger la planète. Iberdrola, l'énergie est notre avenir. Économisons-la.
This is a CBC podcast.
Rick Mercer is with us today to swap stories about the most Canadian moment you've had. This is Alberta at Noon. I'm Judy Aldis. Well, whether he was skewering politicians...
It is one thing to tip your hat to a culture that you were visiting, but the Trudeaus, they dove into the deep end of the Ganges. They did not come up for air.
Or poking fun at Americans.
Congratulations, Canada, for making beaver balls your national dish.
Or maybe harvesting wheat on the prairies.
It is harvest time, and I joined the Bannock family farm to help them separate the wheat from the chaff. I'm in charge of chaff.
His whole career, Rick has celebrated or ranted about Canada. He's now written a memoir, and today Rick joins us to swap stories with you. Well, about 7 minutes after 12, welcome to the show. Well, have you ever had one of those moments where you thought, this is just so Canadian? Rick Mercer should be here. That's what we want to hear about today. Here's the phone number, 1-866-468-4422. Rick, of course, has been a mainstay of the Canadian comedy scene for decades, from his early days in St. John's to his time on This Hour's 22 Minutes to his more recent work as the host of the Rick Mercer Report. It's been, over 2 years now since the last Mercer Report aired, and in that time, Rick has written a memoir about sort of the early part of his life in comedy. The book is called Talking to Canadians. We do have a copy that we will give away to one of you, but you have to join us on the radio to be eligible. The number, again, 1-866-468-4422. Get in touch. Join us on the radio with Rick Mercer, 1-866-468-4422. If you prefer to write, you can email us. We're Alberta at noon at cbc.ca. And Rick joins us via Zoom from Toronto. Hello, Rick. Nice to have you on the show.
Hello, Judy. It's great to be here.
All right. So I'm thinking about your sort of life pre-pandemic, all that travel you did, something like over 500 locations in Canada for the report, the Mercer Report. And then, you left that behind, and then the pandemic hit. I wonder what the last sort of 2 years, year and a half have been like for you.
Well, after the Mercer Report, I hit the road and I started doing stand-up. So I was traveling a lot doing stand-up. And then the pandemic happened. And I don't want to complain about my life during the pandemic, because God knows a lot of people had it a lot worse than me. But in show business, you can't work from home, really. You can be unemployed from home. That's about it. And I've always had a project. I've been lucky that way. And so I needed something. I need a deadline. I need a project. I need someone on the phone who is relying on me to deliver on a certain date. And so that's how the book came about, the memoir. And it seemed like the perfect pandemic thing to do. Like, it involved calling up old friends and colleagues, which a lot of people did during the pandemic. And during the pandemic, especially the early days, if you called someone up, they'd say, "Oh, let me pop a beer. I'll be right back." And then they were content to stay on the phone for hours if need be, because, hey, it was the pandemic and you couldn't go out.
I'm wondering, when you read the book, you get this, there's such an energy line moving through it. You're always thinking about what's next, the next thing. And then I'm wondering what it was like for you writing this book to sort of stop that and kind of look back and sort of peel back the layers, especially on that your early life in comedy. Like, what was that like?
It was a learning curve like nothing else, because my entire life, yes, I've been very busy. It's always about what's next. That's the thing about show business. The show airs on a Tuesday. There's no time to sit around and say, "Oh boy, that went well."
I wonder how I got here.
Another show.
Yeah,
you got another show to do. So you're always looking forward. It's always about what's next. And everything I've ever written, really, of any consequence, has always been Make it shorter. Make it shorter. The rants were always 90 seconds. If I went 1 second over 90, it was an admission of failure on my part. And it was all about short, short, short. You write a memoir, it's long form. It's long form storytelling. And you're also having to look back and reflect, which I've never been that good at. I think maybe that's a guy thing. I don't know. But yeah, big learning curve, that's for sure.
Take us back to sort of your early days in Newfoundland, St. John's, and that sort of like, what was it like as a breeding ground for comedy when you were young?
It was an incredibly vibrant time that I lucked into it. And I realize now writing this book how lucky I've been. And I was just incredibly lucky. The most amazing thing that happened to me was in grade 11. I was a poor student. And I had no excuse, something that I'm ashamed of. It's my biggest regret that I didn't take advantage of school the way I should have. And when you're a poor student and they're always pushing you ahead, eventually the chickens come home to roost. You can't sustain it any longer. You show up in grade 10 and you're going, when did hieroglyphics become part of math? I don't understand. I should have paid attention. And I was kind of lost in a lot of ways. And I joined the drama club. And I don't really know why. I say that in my school, we didn't have a gay-straight alliance, but we had a drama club. So I figured I'd give it a shot. And I was in the drama club. They were doing a play. I didn't like the play. My job was to work backstage. I didn't like that. I spent most of the time in rehearsals just talking to my drama teacher, Lois Brown, who I found endlessly fascinating, far more interesting than the play. So when it was over, I said, Lois, I'm quitting. And she said, if you quit theater, this will be the biggest mistake of your life. And I thought, well, this is a little hysterical. I'm talking about dropping a extracurricular activity. I've done that my entire life. I said, why would it be a mistake? And she said, the next play we do is very important. It's going into the Provincial Drama Festival. And I said, what's the play? And she said, I don't know. You haven't written it yet. And no one had ever suggested that I could write a play before. And everything changed. I said, okay, I'll stick around. I'll write your silly play. And then she put me in a room with a group of kind of misfits, and we created a play. And out of that grew a comedy troupe. And we left school, went downtown, started doing shows in bars and theaters, and dreaming about being in comedy. And from that moment on, I was laser focused on work. I went from being a bad student to being the hardest working guy in the room. Yeah. And if it wasn't for her, my life would have turned out very differently.
Yeah, there's a real through line with your drama teacher, Lois Brown. How would you describe sort of like who you were, what she saw, do you think, in you, who you were when she met you?
She is a very eccentric woman. I say that kindly. She is a great artist in her own right, a modern dancer, a poet, a playwright, a dramaturge, all those things. And for 2 short years, she experimented with having a real job, and she ended up teaching theater and English at my high school. Just 2 years of her life. The rest, she has been an eccentric artist. And she's been a part of my life for forever. She dramaturged plays that I wrote. She directed plays that I wrote. We're friends to this day. And if it wasn't for her, like I say, I don't know what I would have done. And I don't know what she saw in me that she thought I should be writing plays. But she threw it out there and I took it.
You talked a lot. It was my understanding from reading the book, and that she sort of was entertained by listening to you. So yeah.
When I should have been working as a stage manager, instead I was just blathering away.
Yeah. Before we sort of move on, I do want to spend a moment, if you can tell us, so that play that she convinced you to help work on, you end up at a play festival where you then go on to meet someone who ends up in the House of Commons. It's a great little story in your book. Tell us about the first time that you meet Seamus O'Regan.
Oh, well, we went to the Provincial Drama Festival. We had won on the East, and we went, and my buddy Andrew Younghusband and Andrew, who went on to host Canada's Worst Driver and so many shows, we were going to be professional actors. And we found out there's going to be workshops. Oh, and we're going to take all the workshops. We're going to be very serious. And we got to the first workshop, and the fellow who's teaching it seemed a little bit inebriated, and it was all about breathing. Breathe lower, breathe lower. And as I say, I don't know where his love of theater began and his admiration for touching young abdomens ended. But anyway, he went around and then he had us all lying on the floor and we all had our head on each other's stomachs, having to listen to breathing. There's this guy with his head on my stomach. And I said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Seamus O'Regan." And I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Goose High," which was Goose Bay, Labrador. And we heard that they were really good. And I said, "Oh, I hear your play is really good." I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, it was designed to be a crowd pleaser. It has a lot of audience participation in it. And I thought, "Ooh, that sounds awful." Hate that idea. But we became friends. And Seamus and I and Andrew, we immediately bailed from the workshop and didn't go to another one, of course. We had much more pressing things to do.
Oh, one of the great stories in Rick Mercer's new book. It is a memoir. It's called Talking to Canadians. And, just the fact that the book is out gave us an opportunity to have Rick on the show today talking with you. So lots of ways for you to access the conversation today. You know, one way we thought was if you had a story that you felt was like kind of peak Canadian, something that maybe might have fit into one of Rick's either skits or one of his shows, you can call and tell us about that. If there is a story, he's traveled across the country so much, through Alberta so much, so maybe you've intersected with him at some point. If you want to share that story, you can do that as well. The number to call, 1-866-468-4422. Lots of phone calls coming in. I'll give out the phone number again. So if you call, you'll have to speak to Mika in the control room, and then I'll put you on hold, but it won't be long. 1-866-468-4422. We'll start with a call now. We have Merle with us. Merle is in Edmonton on the phone. Merle, hello.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
I just wanted to say thank you to Rick. I loved your program. My story is many years ago, my husband and I and our two daughters, who were very young, traveled across Canada. When we got to Newfoundland, we picked up a basket of blueberries from the children on the side of the road. My husband would not eat anything that had not been washed. We proceeded to the nearest gas station, went in, the daughters held the margarine dishes. We washed the berries, we went to the store, we bought a brick of ice cream. You can tell how old this story is. And we proceeded to drive to the Gander Airport, watch the airplanes come and go, enjoy the blueberries, the ice cream, and have fond memories.
That's a great story.
Also, just finished listening to the audio book of when the world came, or when the town, what is it? When the world
came to town?
To town, just finished listening to that. I cried through most of it, but the memories are good. We all have memories, and blessings to you.
All right. Well, Merle, that was a lovely story.
And I met you, Mercer, and you've met so many people, but you came to Edmonton. You were at the Edmonton Public Library, and we had a few words with a group of people. So lovely. Many good memories.
Oh, very good.
Thank you very much.
All right, Merle.
Thank you very much.
Merle with her bucket of blueberries in the bathroom. Excellent. And the block of ice cream. That's
pretty
true.
good.
All right. Mike wants to tell you, Rick, that he loved you when you got Conrad Black to wax maple leaves. You made me laugh so much. Also, he wants to talk about the Doris Day stunt. Should we pick up with that? That's sort of early days on 22 minutes. Yeah.
It was the early days of 22 minutes. And the astounding thing was, it was the first time we used the internet, and no one was using the internet. And I guess a lot of people are familiar with this. Stockwell Day was the leader of the Alliance, and the Alliance had this policy that if 3% of the population signed a petition, about 350,000 people at the time, 3% of the people who voted in the last election signed a petition, there would be a legally binding referendum on that issue. And I just thought it was absurd, because I thought, well, that's not a lot of signatures, 350,000 people, especially in light of this newfangled thing called the internet that we have. And I could have a petition forcing Stockwell Day to change his name to something silly. And my friend Luciano Casmeri was in the room, and he said, "Can it be Doris?" And then the light went off in my head, and I thought, yes, it will be Doris. And so we launched this petition. It was such early days in the internet that we didn't even own the domain name for 22minutes.com. No TV show had a website. And we launched this petition, and it really captured the imagination of the country. And poor old Stockwell Day suddenly was being questioned about this 350,000 signature level, and he strongly defended it and said it would be very hard to reach 350,000 signatures. 2 days later, we hit 350,000 signatures. He stuck to his story for 2 more days, and we were at 500,000. And then after 1 week, we hit 1 million signatures, and he finally said, okay, let's forget the whole idea of the citizen-initiated referendum. And so it was a very exciting time because I was covering politics, but I never thought we would become a story inside of an election campaign. It was a wild ride, and it certainly showed Canadians the power of the internet, because most of us were completely unfamiliar with it at the time.
Well, and then in the book you talk about how that experiment with this sort of online petition that you started, there were people who wanted you to continue to do other petitions, and
of course, because that's the way things are. When something works, they say, well, what are you going to do next? And I thought, well, I'm not going to do another petition, because the whole point was we proved that petitions on the internet are kind of worthless and people will sign silly petitions. So I didn't want to do another one on the show. And then I had a group of investors come to me and they said, oh, no, we have deep pockets and we have investors in California and we want to create a website that is only petitions. And I thought, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I didn't want anything to do with it. Then, of course, change.org. Now, it's one of the biggest websites in the world. So I don't know if it was the same people or not, but I was like, that's a dumb idea. But what I did do with the website was I turned it into a message board. A couple of months later, I said, okay, we've used the internet for evil. Let's use it for good. And I traveled to Bosnia, and we created a video before Christmas about what our peacekeepers were doing in Bosnia and profiled some of them that were very young and were away for their first Christmas. And we just made this lovely video, but it was driving Canadians to the website, and they could post messages to Canadians who were serving overseas in Bosnia. And again, hundreds of thousands of people responded. It was overwhelming. And that really changed the way I looked at comedy, because it was the first time I saw how it really can be a force for good and for change and for moving the needle on certain issues. And I just found it incredibly personally rewarding. And it began a lifetime of working with the forces, highlighting the work of the Canadian forces, highlighting different military bases and the different branches of the Canadian military. And that's something that I continue to do for the rest of my career.
Rick Mercer, you recognize the voice, I'm sure. He is with us today on the program talking about his new book. It is a memoir. It's called Talking to Canadians. And if you want to join us on the radio, we'd love to hear from you. 1-866-468-4422. 1-866-468-4422. Rudy is with us now. Rudy is in Fort Macleod. Hello, Rudy.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, you're here with myself and Rick.
Hello, Rick. How are you?
I'm good, Rudy. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, thank you. I just wanted to say a big thank you to you for everything you've been doing. Your comedy helped me get through Canadian politics.
There's a compliment for you.
That's a pretty powerful compliment. Thank you very much.
Is there one particular moment that you remember best, Rudy? Or that you want to maybe hear the backstory to?
You know me, pick a favorite from Southern Alberta or Alberta that you came to, one of your favorites from being here.
Okay, that's a good question, Rick.
I tell you, you mentioned it briefly off the top of the show. So many things on the show were iconically Canadian, and I was always aware of imagery. And I thought, how is it possible years into the show that we haven't driven a combine harvester? Because it's such an iconic Canadian image. And I grew up in a place where we don't know jack all about wheat. Like, we're not wheat people on the island of Newfoundland. And so I was personally interested, but then I looked into it. And of course, the problem with driving a combine harvester, never mind putting me behind the wheel of a combine harvester, they're one of the most expensive machines on the earth, I think. But also, it's such a limited window, harvest window, weather dependent, everything else. It just seemed like the type of thing that no one could sensibly afford to make the time and devote the resources to a TV show like ours. And then we contacted the Bannock family, and they were in Round Hill, Alberta, and they were all in. And they had me out to the farm, and we harvested wheat together. And it was entirely because of their belief that it was important they get that story out. It was important that Canadians see what this farming family was like. This farm had been in the family for generations. And, we had this spectacular meal at the end of the day right there among the wheat. It was just a beautiful day. But I kind of figured out later that they lost 8 hours of harvest time in ideal weather conditions. And they did it not because of them. It wasn't going to help them. They didn't have any single product on the shelf. They did it because they wanted Canadians to see what it is that farmers do and see the family farm up close. And that was a tremendous sacrifice. That's a lot of hours.
Yeah.
And then they also trusted me with their combine, which I don't know if you've seen me drive.
Were they maybe showing off their combine skills? We have actually a lot of listeners who call in from their combines, which is always one of the highlights of the show. But was it who because they drew an RMR in the field, right?
Oh, yeah, they did. Yeah, they really went out of their way. The hospitality was
that wasn't
awesome.
You driving the combine for that, then I'll take it, right?
No.
All right, 1-866-468-4422 is the number for you to call. You're calling in, a lot of you calling in wanting to just talk with Rick, a lot of you wanting to share your stories, your sort of moment when you thought, oh, this is peak Canada. And I think we have one such story. Nadine's on the phone now. Nadine is in Edmonton. Nadine, hello.
Hello there.
Hi. What's the
Hi,
story?
Nadine.
What's the story you wanted to share?
Hi, Rick. I just wanted to say thank you, Rick. You're amazing. So one very Canadian situation that we found ourselves in, my husband and my cousin and I were driving to Toronto from Edmonton. We were doing some sightseeing on the way, and we thought, hey, there's Terry Fox. So we stopped at the Terry Fox statue. It was a beautiful moment. We just, enjoyed the ambiance of the whole situation. And as we were walking away, we realized, hey, we were all standing there with Terry Fox, smoking our faces off. And we thought, how inappropriate is that? Only in Canada that could happen.
Oh, whoops. All right. Yeah. Yes. Smoking in front of the Terry Fox.
That would be a good time to quit right there. That would be your heritage minute.
Children, this is the definition of irony. Yeah, right. All right.
That's right. It's just ridiculous. And we felt really bad when we were getting back in the car. So,
all right. Well, thanks for that, Nadine.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Thank you, Nadine.
All right. Bernie from High River has emailed in to say thank you to Rick Mercer for all you've done for this country and being a positive and fun influence. Love all the shows you've been in. My husband laughed his head off with the Jan Arden episode on the Calgary Tower. I actually just rewatched that this morning. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about how it is that Jan Arden ended up being... I'm not sure even how you would describe her role on the show. Foil, a co-host?
Well, for starters, Jan became a regular on a show that never had regulars. We just didn't. That wasn't the format of the show. One of the hard parts about doing the show was we really had no safety net. If you were in a part of the country, you had to get a piece. And I can't remember what happened, but we were in Calgary, and the piece that we had planned on doing just wasn't coming together, and we knew we were in serious trouble and we needed to get a piece. And all I could come up with was, I'll do a tour of Calgary, talk about why Calgary is such a great city, vibrant city. But then I thought, who am I to be telling Canadians why they should visit Calgary? I'll just be reading crib notes off a tourist sheet. We need someone who has the authority. And so I thought of Jan Arden, who I didn't know, and through various connections, I got a telephone number for her, and I called her up, and she was familiar with the show. And I said, will you come on the show and just give me a tour of Calgary? And she said, well, I'm about to go out on the road. I'll be back next month. And I said, no, I mean today. And she was like, today? And I said, yeah, like now. And she said, okay, give a girl some time, some warning. Okay. And literally 25 minutes later, she shows up in this parking lot. And she says, on the way, I had some great ideas. We could go to the zoo and we'll go backstage. We'll feed the animals. We could go to Calgary Winter Park, maybe see if they'll give us a bobsled. And I thought, oh, this woman is delusional. I've been at this a long time. You just can't show up at a zoo and say, can we go backstage and feed animals? And you just can't show up at Calgary Winter Park unannounced. But of course, everywhere we went, they just said, oh, hi, Jan, come in. So we ended up with this phenomenal piece where we're feeding the hippopotamus and we're going on. I put Jan on the skeleton
luge,
the luge, and she screamed so loud that when she screamed so loud and the abject terror was so real, I thought we have struck comedy gold. And over the years, she became this incredible foil, and she would come on the show and we would go on these adventures that she was really, truly 100% reticent about. And she's just my favorite guest in the world, my favorite person to have a cup of tea with, and my favorite person to appear on TV with.
Oh, that's wonderful. Rick Mercer, our guest today on this Tuesday edition of Alberta at Noon. If you're on hold, we'll ask you to just stay with us. We'll get to your calls in the next half hour. Rick's written a memoir. It's called Talking to Canadians. We have a copy we'll give away to one of you who joins us on the show today. But that'll all have to wait till the next half hour of the program because it's now 12:31. Tahara Fruzen with us in the newsroom now. Hello, Tahara.
Hi, Judy. CBC News has learned the head of Alberta's police watchdog agency has resigned. Susan Husin had been executive director of the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team since 2014. It's responsible for investigating misconduct by police, but it's been struggling due to underfunding for years and now has a backlog of cases dating back to 2018. Husin starts a new job as a prosecutor with Alberta's Special Prosecution Unit next month. And Alberta's projected deficit is down to $5.8 billion thanks to rebounding world oil prices. The figure is in the province's mid-year fiscal update released this morning. It's $12 billion less than what was forecast in the February budget. Revenue was $14 billion more than predicted in that budget as well. But 3/4 of those increases is due to increased resource revenues. The government says the numbers show the economic recovery is underway. Turning to weather in Edmonton today, mainly cloudy conditions and a high of +5. Tomorrow, mainly cloudy, temperature falling to 0 by the afternoon. Thursday, few clouds and a high of +1. In Calgary today, beautiful day ahead, mainly cloudy and a high of 12 degrees. Tomorrow, cloudy as well, wind out of the west, gusting to 70 at times, and temperature falling to +2 by the afternoon. Thursday, a few clouds and a high of +2 expected as well. Right now in Calgary, mostly cloudy and 9 degrees, and in Edmonton right now, it's 3 degrees.
No sign of that whiplash quite yet, eh?
No whiplash of this cold winter we should be expecting soon, but yeah,
all right.
Still good.
Thanks, Tahara.
Thanks.
Tahara Fruzen in the newsroom. I'm Judy Aldis. This is a Tuesday edition of Alberta at Noon, and our guest today, Rick Mercer, a man who was kind of like our own personal tour guide to our country for 15 years.
It is daybreak on the East Coast. It's so early I can barely speak, and for some reason I can't feel my legs. But you've got to get up at this hour if you want to go fishing for Canada's most valuable seafood export, lobsters. Welcome to Richmond Hill, Ontario. I am here to visit with a group of elite athletes who have made the journey from the backyard to the top of their sport, and then down, and then up, and then down, and then up. They are Canada's Olympic trampoline team. Back home. How do we know how many bears there are? Well, every winter, someone has to track down the bears as they're hibernating in their cave and then crawl inside the cave and then tag the mother bear and their babies. And this week, that person is me. Note to self, must update Will.
Just some clips from the Rick Mercer report that aired on CBC. Well, since the show went off air almost 2 years ago now, Rick has written a memoir. It's called Talking to Canadians. And he is here today, well, talking with you. 1-866-468-4422. Rick, I'm going to just take a moment because I'm going to just tell you this on behalf of the people who have called in. We've had a lot of people from the military who just wanted to say thank you. So I'll just throw that out to you. From all, we have, of course, a lot of military families in Alberta, and a lot of them are phoning in, just saying that they just wanted me to pass that along to you for all that you've done for the military.
Well, that's very nice. And from that first time that we went to Bosnia, and I was really embarrassed because I wasn't aware of how many peacekeepers we had at the time in Bosnia. I wasn't aware of the harm's way they were in, and I was thinking, here I am, Mr. Canada, Mr. paying attention to current affairs and what's going on. It was off my radar, and it was off a lot of Canadians' radar. And that's why I decided to go and shoot that piece. But one of the strangest takeaways were how grateful everyone was that we had made the trip. And I thought, well, this is completely upside down. I'm leaving, by the way, in 48 hours. And so I've got the 48 hours to deal with the landmines, but you're here for a long time. And they're not there because they chose to be there. They're there because our political leaders, on behalf of all of us, sent them there. And I just thought it was amazing that they were expressing gratitude to us for coming when it should be the other way around. And I've always been uncomfortable, but when people say thank you, because obviously I'm grateful for it, but I've always been a bit uncomfortable because they do such good work. They're just such great people. And they also made for such great television over the years. So many great natural storytellers I met in the forces. And I just enjoyed all of those shoots. And I was always eager to go no matter where they were.
I want to bring a caller in because she wants to talk about one of the things you did sort of earlier in your career. It's Sherry. Sherry's on the phone. She's in Red Deer. Sherry, hi.
Hi.
So
Sherry.
We should learn a bit about you first, right? Because you're American-born.
I'm an American-born, but I am Canadian through and through.
Okay, so you moved here. When about did you move to Canada?
Moved here in 1968.
Okay, all right.
And I became a citizen in 2001. I held on to my American citizenship because my mother was still living. And when she passed, I felt that she gave me permission to become a citizen here. So I did, and it was a thrilling moment. And I would have loved to have shared it with Rick Mercer. It was emotional. It was probably the most Canadian thing I've ever done. And I learned about Canada through CBC radio, CBC television, and I learned about politics through Rick Mercer. He did it all.
And you actually liked the Talking to Americans, did you?
I did. Made me laugh because there's nothing dumber than an American when it comes to world views. They think that the United States is an island. There's nothing above, below, around, anything. It's just the United States. And sadly, I was part of that. And so when I came to Canada, I was really dumb. I had no idea about how the political system worked. I could barely name the provinces, and I had a university education, so,
Yeah. Sherry, I'm going to use your story as a little bit of a springboard to talking about those skits, Talking to Americans. So I'm going to let you go, okay? But I hope you'll listen in. All right. Thanks for your call.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
All right. So, Rick, for those who, I don't know, maybe weren't around when you went to the States, so in the book, in your memoir, you talk about how that skit, those series of skits, Talking to Americans, that segment actually kind of happened by accident. This wasn't something that you went planning to do. To tell us the genesis.
It was a complete accident. I was in Washington. We had gone down a few times. I used Washington, D.C. as a background for one of the rants. And we did some sketches there, went to the White House and goofed around in the press gallery. But we were kind of running out of things to do there. And I wasn't having wild success there. And one day we were just taking a break from shooting. And this fella came along and he saw that I had the sticker on one of the cases that said Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And he said, and he was a well-dressed, well-heeled guy with a Pentagon pass on. And he said, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation? And I said, yes, yeah. And then he just stared at me for about 45 seconds. And I thought, this is weird. And then he snapped his fingers and went, Canada. I said, yeah, of course, Canada. And he said, what are you doing way up here? And I thought, wow, this guy's a doozy. And I didn't want to explain that we weren't a news crew. He just assumed we were a news crew because we looked like a news crew. And I said, I'm just I don't know why I did this. I said, I'm following the president of Canada. He's on a tour of the United States. He said, oh, yeah, I've been following your president's tour. It's going well. And then he said something about alphabetical order. And I said, I'm sorry, what? He said, do you not have alphabetical order in Canada? And I said, well, just walk me through it. he said, well, A goes before B, B goes before C, on and on. He started explaining to me about what alphabetical order was. So I called over my cameraman and I said, we're going to interview this guy. And I asked him about how alphabetical order worked. And he explained it to me, and he suggested very strongly that Canada should consider using it because it comes in handy. And then when it was over, it was about 45 seconds, I said, do you think anyone else would explain alphabetical order? And we went around and we suddenly had 15, 20 people. Very excited that we were getting alphabetical order. We came home, we put it on television, and it took off. It was like riding a rocket because we were on this show that was getting 1.5 million viewers a week. And suddenly I had a segment inside that show that people were demanding week after week because the audience didn't understand. They were like, are these actors? That's impossible. Are they in on the joke? That would be too weird. And it turned out to be just so exciting because I spent the next 2.5 years basically traveling to different great American cities, having great meals, visiting museums, and talking to Americans. And it was the only time I always felt a little bit bad, and I always thought, they'll never see this. They'll never see this in 100 years.
Pre-YouTube days, right? Yeah.
2 years later, YouTube was invented, and it's been on YouTube ever since. But it was the only time my father ever said anything to me about anything I ever did on stage or television. He called me up and he said, I watched the show. He said, I saw that talking to Americans. I said, Dad, you wouldn't believe the reaction. It's unbelievable, the reaction. He said, yes, Jerry called, said it was the funniest thing he ever saw. And the neighbors came over, want to know if you're doing it again. I said, oh, yeah, I'm going back next week. He said, promise me one thing. I said, what's that, Dad? He said, promise me you'll never, ever do that ever again. It's terrible. I said, oh. And the last thing I want to do is disappoint my father. But I was like, unfortunately, Dad, I'll be going back.
Sorry about that, Dad.
It's kind of like when he said, if you come in that house wearing an earring, my son, you can turn around and leave and never come back. And then I came in with the skull dangling from my ear. So he was used to the disappointment by then.
All right. Andrew's on the phone now. Andrew is in Calgary. Andrew, hi. Nice to have you on the show.
Hi, Judy and Rick.
Hello. Yeah.
Hi, Andrew.
Where do you want to take us?
Well, about 6 or 10 years ago, I went to a ballroom dance competition at Big Fancy Hotel downtown in Calgary, and there was heat after heat of people in flowing ballroom gowns and white tie and tail, and then all of a sudden, they turned the music off. And Rick Mercer started walking across the dance floor. Well, now ballroom dancers need music in order to keep time with something, and in order to know where each other's going. Well, Rick just walks across the floor with his microphone, and there's the ballroom. Then the floor fills up with people whirling with no music, and Rick is able to talk over. I guess they've turned off the music because they're going to put the music back in post-production.
Yeah.
And Rick is giving his spiel. Well, I don't think Rick saw that he had caused such confusion on the dance floor by walking right through the middle of the competition. There was a couple that got stepped on by another couple and fell flat on the floor right behind him.
Rick, what are you doing to the dance, to the ballroom dancers?
There's no way we did that without warning. The dancers knew that the music was going to be turned off, and they weren't in actual competition. But you're absolutely right. Music is the bane of your existence when you're shooting a television show because A, if you use the music that's in the air, you have to license it. You have to pay for it. Sometimes you have to figure out what it is. It's a long drawn out process. And and you can't really, if you do an edit, it gets messy. So you're always asking people to turn off the music. It's an unfortunate part of TV production. And I think we were warned that some of the dancers might spin out of control. But generally, I love doing this. I loved exploring these worlds because, yeah, everyone knows about ballroom dance. But really, unless they know someone who's in ballroom dance, they don't get to meet them and they don't get to see how these competitions happen. And we would make a point of, if we were going to do ballroom dance, we wouldn't go to the Canadian Ballroom Dance Championships. We'd just pick a province and go and do a regular ballroom dance event. So it's folks doing something because they absolutely love it. And there was so much of that. It was like exploring these macro communities, and ballroom dancing is absolutely one of them.
Why were you there in the first place, Andrew? Are you a ballroom dancer?
Well, I kind of enjoy watching it. Yeah, you can't you can't ignore the women in the skimpy dresses.
Oh, so there we go.
But I gotta admire Rick for his physical comedy too, because during that episode he also he partnered up with T.L. Raider, a professional from Ottawa, I think, and Jean-Marc Genereux, who's one of Canada's best-known judges and instructors. And he actually took some lessons with these people and displayed his 2 left feet.
Well, anytime I was afforded the opportunity to try something, I made a decision really early on. Never goof around to the extent where you're doing something poorly on purpose, because people will get a whiff of that. And it's actually, I believe, disrespectful. All you can do is try your best. And sometimes you can actually muddle through. There's luck is a great factor. It's like how many people, the first time they swung a golf club on a golf course, it went straight down the fairway. And they were like, hey, I think I'm going to be good at this. And then it just goes downhill for the next 2 years. Yeah. And so many things I did worked out like that. I just actually kind of pulled it off, but I never, ever did it poorly on purpose. But I will say the bar was low. I remember I was doing ice kite surfing one time, and I was trying my hardest, and it was brutal. I'd be up for 1 second, and I'd be down in the ice, and the wind would come along and drag me through the ice, and I was never so sore. And the piece aired, and this kid emailed me, and he said, "Wow, man, you were really bad at that, even by Rick Mercer standards."
Oh, my goodness.
And I thought, I'm my own low bar.
Jennifer's now on the phone from Edmonton. Jennifer, hello. Jennifer in Edmonton, you with us here on the show? No, Jennifer, too bad. She had a great story to share. It involved Screech. Maybe she'll call back. Oh, okay. All right. Rob's with us now. Rob's in Edmonton. Rob, hello.
Hi, Rob.
Hi there. Hi to both of you.
Hey, you want to ask a Rush question, I'm told.
I'm a huge Rick. I've been watching him for decades. Dare I say that sounds like a long time, but I'm old. I've loved you forever. I remember seeing the Geddy Lee episode, the Alex Lifeson episode, but arguably the one, I'm a musician myself, was the late, great Neil Peart. He's known for being such a private person, not being in the public eye a lot. But I wanted to know the backstory of one, how you landed that whole episode, because I thought it was hilarious. And then the actual, what was it like to play drums with him? He was firing off jokes, all sorts of things.
I knew someone would call up about Neil Peart because I get mail to this day about the Neil Peart segment, and I get it from all over the world. It's one of the pieces that's traveled all over the world because Rush is adored all over the world. But people who adore Neil Peart, who's now deceased, they know there's very little in the way of interviews with Neil, and he led a very private life. And then in the last 10, 15 years of his life, he had a number of very tragic things happen to him. And he became, I won't say reclusive, but he completely disappeared from the public eye. And I just loved Neil Peart because when I was a kid, I took drumming lessons, and my buddies and I would sit around and listen to Rush for the drums. And we just took a stab in the dark, and we asked him if he'd come on the show and give me some drum lessons. And he answered yes, just out of the blue. He was a fan of the show. Geddy had done the show. And I think he knew that we were just going to have fun. And he had a great sense of humor. And I think because of the tragic circumstances of his life and the loss that he experienced, I think most times when he was interviewed by people, that was often the subject matter. And it was just something that he couldn't talk about or didn't want to go there. This is my theory anyway. And he knew that wouldn't be the subject matter. And he liked the ideas that I had about going to the secret Rush lair where we had literally Neil Peart's giant famous drum kit. And then I had this little dinky drum kit. And he liked the fact that I had a motorcycle license and I played drums, and he had a motorcycle license and played drums. But it's so funny because he did both of them. He was the best in the world. I was just a guy who could barely play the drums and drove a moped when I was in high school. So it's not like we had that much in common. But anyway, he agreed to do it. And it was a beautiful interview. And he told drummer jokes, and he was incredibly self-deprecating. And it was fantastic to spend time with him. It was lovely. And I corresponded with him afterwards. And yeah, it was a real treat, and certainly right up there in terms of things that I never thought would happen.
Rob, was there one sort of moment of the skit? I know you said you were a fan of the band Rush, but was there sort of a moment of the skit that you remember liking the most, or?
Well, every bit of it from the very beginning when they were going to go to the Rush Batcave, as Rick put it. And I remember that, Neil's on his BMW and Rick's on a Vespa or a moped or something. It was very small.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. And I remember when he was doing the jokes, you were doing the during those.
Yeah.
When he was doing the self-deprecating drummer joke. I thought that was hilarious. I thought it was absolutely hilarious.
And then we were so excited. We thought when Neil starts playing on that big drum kit, the hell with it, let's get pyro. And we hired a pyro guy to come in and put indoor pyro around Neil's drum kit. So it started exploding and fireworks went off. And, it really was a great piece. But for people who are fans of Neil Peart, it really is a special piece to them, because I think they know it showed a piece of his personality that they maybe weren't that familiar with, just because he was such a private guy. And that's why people from all around the world are always watching. It has nothing to do with me on the Vespa, I can assure you of that.
All right, Rob, thanks for your call. It was great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Rob.
We'll go to Jennifer now. Jennifer was the one with the screech story. She's called back in. She's in Edmonton. Hello, Jennifer.
Hi, JD. Hey. Hi, Rick.
Hi, Jennifer.
When I was 21 years old, I did a cycling trip from coast to coast. Ended up in Cape Fear, Newfoundland. And wonderful Canadian experiences that just have made me fall in love with Canada. But I'll tell you one of the Newfoundland ones, we got off the ferry outside of St. John's, the three of us, and there was construction. So we were kind of hopscotching around construction. Probably all the cars were swearing at us. But there was one car that kept pulling over, and then we'd ride past him, and then he'd pull over, and run past him. Finally, there was some space, so he waved us over, and we pulled in beside him, and he said, "Why didn't you tell us you were coming?" And we said, "Who are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm the president of the St. John's Cycling Club. And if you told us you were coming, we would have been here to meet you." And those folks hosted us through St. John's. We went jet skiing and out for brunch. We got screeched, and we just fell in love with Newfoundland and the wonderful people out there.
They were doing what you did, Rick, long before you did it.
Yeah. And that's a lovely story, and it's a beautiful story. And there's always stories like that about Newfoundland. But I can say there are stories like that about.
I believe he was going to, his Zoom call has frozen, if you're wondering. Listening with bated breath, I bet you he was going to say about every part of the country. Rick, are you back with us? Oh, that would just be such a drag. Rick Mercer is our guest today on the show. He's joining us by Zoom. Our connection has been fabulous since just after noon, but it seems to have frozen now. So, Jennifer, are you still with us?
I am.
Yeah. I think Rick was going to say that you could have found, was that your experience as well, that you find that sort of hospitality anywhere in the country?
Oh, absolutely. We ended up watching wrestling with complete strangers in their house. I didn't even know wrestling existed at that time. With 3 generations of a family that took us in, and Manitoba, we had RCMP's wife coming out to our tent and bring us baking and offering to do laundry for us because she saw us riding in the rain. It is story on story one after the other across the country.
Awesome. All right, Jennifer, thanks so much for your phone call.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, we are doing our best to try and reconnect with Rick. Are we having any luck? I don't think we are, which would be super sad, but such is life in Zoom land, right? Well, let me just read some of the emails that have come in. Someone has said, Rick for Prime Minister. I'm sure he hears that a lot. Let's do a petition. She says, referring back, of course, to the skit that he had where he collected signatures on a petition to try and get Stockwell Day to change his name. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have an opportunity to be able to ask Rick a bit about his future plans or what's in store for him. Perhaps if you tune in to his WordFest event that's coming up on December 7th, maybe he'll talk about it himself. WordFest, of course, is a Calgary-based organization, but because the event on December 7th is a virtual event, you can join from anywhere in the province. Rick will be there. He'll be talking about his new memoir called, again, Talking to Canadians, and Jan Arden will be with him for that. So if you want tickets or information on that, go to wordfest.com. Well, a bit of an unceremonious end to our conversation, and we're sorry about that. But as we say, not much we can do about that. But I hope you enjoyed it. If you know somebody out there who would like to hear this show, hear Rick, reminisce back on his early days in comedy, feel free to share the show with us. We'll put up the podcast by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can share it that way. Tomorrow on the show, we will turn our attention to the Omicron variant. There have been no cases of it identified in Alberta yet, but there are, of course, cases elsewhere in the country. So we know you have a lot of questions and concerns about what this new variant of concern might mean, how we should be responding to it. So tomorrow on the program, we're going to sort of assemble some experts, and they'll join us to answer all your questions that you have about Omicron. Well, we're doing things a little ass backwards, let's just say, on the show today, because we have Rick Mercer back with us.
I'm back. I don't know what happened.
Oh, you froze. You got zoomed.
I got zoomed. I'm so glad. You should have seen the wild panic in my little home office in the last 2.5 minutes.
Oh, well, you're a good man for sticking with us. Listen, we got a minute. You want to tell us what you're up to now? What's coming? I know you're you're out with your book now, but what's next?
Well, I'm doing WordFest with Jan Arden on December 7th. If people go to wordfest.com, they can figure out how to buy a book and log in and join Jan and I virtually for a love-in, where she will be torturing me for a change. And then I'm going out on the road with Just for Laughs, and I'll be in Edmonton and Alberta and Calgary, May 20th and May 21st.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, I'm glad we reconnected. I'm glad you stuck with us, and it was a real treat. I know our listeners really loved hearing from you, Rick. So thank you.
I loved hearing from them, absolutely. And the reaction to the book has been so gratifying. Thank you so much.
Excellent. All right. Rick Mercer, his new book is called Talking to Canadians.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.